Are you concerned about the state of the world? Now, you will be in the minority if you're not. Chaos reigns. Disarray and destabilization surrounds us. And in my last video, I went as far as to say that we are in the midst of a controlled demolition of Western civilization. And I don't mean that as hyperbole. If you've been following me, you will know that I am supremely interested in figuring out what all this around us is. For example, what's the stuff we see and feel? How do we explain the chaos and suffering that exists alongside the sometimes joy and pleasures in life? And why does it seem that all we are as a species is a human resource, something to be used and manipulated for the benefit of an elite? And why do I constantly get the feeling that this world is one of smoke and mirrors, an illusion? What is all of this? Now, you must have thought along these lines yourself at some point. I can't believe I'm the only one to reflect on this. Well, thankfully, I'm not the only one. Many people who are far cleverer than me have done due diligence and who have spoken about and written on the relevant subjects. It just remains for curious people like me to try and fit the pieces together. Also, if you are a regular viewer, you will know that I believe this beautiful planet to be a prison, a perceptual prison, a confinement of understanding which is controlled by others. And this would explain much of the mayhem that exists. It explains the totalitarian mindset that is pushing the planet towards a new world order, where a centralized minority will control the majority. They'll control your movements, your speech, your purchasing power, the information you receive or are denied, your memories, your thoughts even. In other words, every aspect of your life. And on another level, this is already happening. The New World Order will only intensify the experience. Thankfully, there has been a conscious awakening taking place, with a pushback from the awakened against this malicious plan. I might even call it the apocalypse. And no, not the usual idea of mass destruction and end-of-world stuff we normally associate with the word, but the real meaning of the Greek word, apocalypsis, which is a revelation or a revealing. This is the apocalypse taking place. And through this apocalypse, many people are seeing this malicious scheme unfolding in plain sight, and most don't like it. They're beginning to sense the walls and the bars of the prison around them. What was once hidden is now being exposed. And if you watched my videos on the breaking of the 7 seals of Revelation, you would know that this is part of that process. An awakening takes place because of the breaking of the seals. And as a disclaimer, the material for that study isn't mine. It's Jason Brashears of archaics.com. Now, I encourage you to visit his website and YouTube channel to see this in depth. It's fascinating stuff. I might even return to it myself in the near future. Now, of course, there are those who, in spite of everything, remain asleep, and in many instances by their own choice, while others don't even know they're sleeping. Now, besides wanting to help maintain and improve my memory through the process of making these videos, I've decided that I also want to inspire, if I can, others to build a brave new world of their own through changed perceptions in our opposition to the New World Order of the Cabal, and to resist the psychopaths who have a different kind of world in mind. And I think I may have figured it out. Maybe not every aspect, but enough to set me on my way. This is a journey that requires persistence and patience. The goal is not for the lazy. It's going to take perseverance. And I know this is a huge claim to have found the long-awaited theory of everything. But let's be clear, I'm not making that claim. That would be ridiculous. Over the years, I've been on a journey, not just outwardly through books, videos, and science, but inwardly through reflection, intuition, and experience. And along the way, I've been gathering pieces of information, ideas about vibration, quantum physics, panpsychism, consciousness, and how they might all be connected. Now, I'm not claiming to have found the ultimate truth of the universe. What I have found is a theory that resonates deeply with me. It's not about convincing anyone else. It's about sharing something that, when all the pieces clicked together, made me feel like I was finally seeing a coherent picture of reality. Not perfect, not final, but meaningful. And that's what I want to share with you. Now, much of what I have discussed in previous videos have been validated in books I have recently read. A synchronistic convergence, maybe. Finally, everything seems to be coming together. Now, I realized that for me, it was a matter of reducing the problem of reality, or illusion, it's the same thing, to its fundamentals, to look at the nitty-gritties and use that as the key forward. Because I don't see how else a dullard like me, who is not able to describe reality in terms of mathematical equations, see any other way to figure out how to describe our reality other than by looking at the fundamentals in easy to understand terms. This is not a universe of stuff, as the materialist would claim. It's a mathematical construct. It's a universe of information. It's a simulation. As I've said, much of what I'm about to share has been with me for a long time. Not just as information in my mind, but as a truth I hadn't yet fully grasped. It was knowledge I could explain, but not embody. Now, however, the truth has finally come home to rest. So stick around, because things are about to get interesting. I'm the Grumpy Grandpa. So let's begin with the basics. Everything you see around you is made of atoms. And these atoms are not solid objects, despite what you might think. They're mostly empty space, with particles constantly in motion. Zoom in further, and those particles are not really particles at all. They are vibrations occupying invisible quantum fields, fields that stretch across the universe. Electrons vibrate, protons vibrate. Even the vacuum of space is filled with subtle fluctuations. And this isn't New Age talk, it's quantum physics. Now, according to quantum field theory, a particle is simply a ripple in that field. Matter, light, even gravity are all patterns of vibration. Now, we're tapping here into something that bridges physics, philosophy, and even to some extent New Age interpretations. For example, to change what we experience, we need to understand the language of vibration, or the language of frequency, and the laws governing that language. I ended the last video with these 3 truths. Firstly, when you care for others, everything else improves. Number 2, it doesn't matter where you're at, it matters what you believe. And then 3, when I change how I look at the world changes how it looks at me. And all of this will be made plain as we proceed. This reality of ours is outrageous enough to prompt us to question this existence. Now, I began with some very interesting questions, And I suppose we could continue with, why are some people rich while others struggle to feed themselves? Why are some healthy while others are sickly throughout their lives? Why do some die in childhood while some live to extreme old age? Why are there those who always seem to be happy while others are constantly sad or suffer with acute depression? Why are there psychopaths and sociopaths in the world who want to harm others for pleasure? Now, often life seems ridiculous and unfair. Now, I understand that being the down-to-earth type that you are, you might come back and say, well, that's just life, Grumpy. It is what it is. Well, maybe, but what if we can change much of the suffering we experience? What if I told you that I now believe it's all a matter of personal choice? What would you say to that? Okay, maybe I don't want to know. But this is a very deep rabbit hole, one that has many diverging paths, but all eventually merging at the same destination. Let's look at just a few of those lines of inquiry as an introduction to this fascinating subject. Well, firstly, there's panpsychism. Now, we're learning that vibration alone doesn't explain the most mysterious force in the universe. That's consciousness. What is it? Where does it come from? Now, science can measure brainwaves. It can detect neural activity, depending who you're measuring, of course. But it can't explain why we feel anything at all. One radical idea offers a clue, and that's panpsychism, the belief that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but is a fundamental property of reality. Like mass or charge, consciousness is baked into the very fabric of the universe, not in the way humans experience it, but as a kind of proto-awareness. Even a single electron could possess a sliver of experience, not through a thought or an emotion, but a spark. Now, if that sounds wild, it's because, well, it is. But it also solves a big problem. How does consciousness emerge from unconscious matter? Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it was there all along. Then there is Eastern philosophy and ancient wisdom. Now, strangely enough, this idea isn't new. Ancient beliefs have whispered this truth for thousands of years. In Vedanta, which is a Hindu philosophical system which explores the nature of reality, consciousness is the ground of being. In Buddhism, reality is mind-dependent. In Taoism, the Tao is the unnameable force that flows through all things. All these philosophies speak of energy, vibration, and interconnection. Then there is prana, that vital energy that animates the body and connects us to the universe. What modern physics calls quantum fields, ancient mystics have experienced and understood directly, maybe using a different language, but having the same insight. Then we have the idea of the universe as mind. So what happens when you put all this together? Well, quantum physics says everything is vibration. Panpsychism says everything has some form of consciousness. Eastern wisdom says consciousness is the source of all. Now, all this leads to a stunning possibility, one that may even confirm my belief in simulation theory. The universe is not a machine. It's a mind. What if reality is what conscious looks like from the outside? What if consciousness is what reality feels like from the inside? Maybe the hum beneath all things, that vibration, that underlying frequency, maybe it's a song. Maybe every atom, every star, every heartbeat is part of a cosmic symphony. What if you are not separate from it? What if you are not just an observer? You are vibration. You are consciousness. You are the universe, waking up. What if everything is experiencing itself through you and through me? At the heart of quantum physics lies a revelation that shatters how we see the world. It's not solid. It's not fixed. It's waves. It's vibration. It's all potentiality. Every particle, every electron, photon, and quark is not a thing, but a ripple in an invisible field. Quantum field theory tells us the universe is made up of those fields. And what we call particles, well, they are simply their vibrations. Think of it this way. The electron isn't a marble. It's a tiny note in a vast symphony. The atom isn't a building block. It's a resonant pattern. Matter itself is just standing waves of energy. What we called empty space isn't truly empty at all. It seethes with fluctuations, a quantum froth of 0-point energy. So nothing is actually still. Stillness is an illusion. The Kabbalion, which is a study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece, says this about reality. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. This is ancient knowledge. Energy is everything, whether tangible or intangible. Ultimately, it's the basis of the universe. It cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. Now, this law is known as the conservation of energy, and it holds incredible meaning, especially when seen through the lens of quantum physics and the nature of consciousness and vibration. Death itself is just the transformation of energy. Quantum physics teaches us that particles are not standalone objects. As we have already seen, they are vibrations in underlying fields. So energy isn't just about moving things. It's about vibrational patterns in the structure of space-time itself. So when something changes in the quantum realm, say a particle is annihilated or created, energy is not lost or made. It's transferred from one vibrational pattern to another. Many physicists believe the universe is a closed system, which means the total amount of energy in the universe is constant. It has changed form countless times, but in all this flux, nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. And when you combine this with the idea that everything is vibration, it gets even more profound. Vibration equals energy equals frequency. Energy equals eternal, ever transforming, never destroyed. Consciousness may be another form of energy, unfolding, evolving, shifting, but never ending. So we, as conscious beings, are not a temporary blip, but an expression of energy that's been transforming forever and will continue even after this particular form fades. I began by asking some fundamental questions, and the deepest question of them all is, after all we have just discussed, the wonders of the universe, if everything is vibration, if consciousness pervades reality, if we are the universe itself, then why is there suffering? That's the profoundest question of all, and one that echoes through every mystical text, every philosophical inquiry, every personal dark night of the soul. Let's unpack that for a moment, and not with shallow answers, but with the weight and mystery it deserves. We have looked at the theory that we are the universe experiencing itself. And as such, we should consider suffering as a contrast or a depth of experience. Now, for me, this is not easy to come to terms with, especially when I consider some of the suffering others have experienced. I'm appalled and shiver with horror when I think of the suffering some have undergone. When I see scenes like Jews half starved to death in Nazi concentration camps, like Auschwitz, Dachau, Flossenburg. I'm horrified when I see photos of decimated bodies piled high, some of them children, and other gross examples of man's inhumanity to man. But when I break even that emotion down, the strong empathy I feel is all part of experiencing, even though I may not like it. From another perspective, especially in Eastern philosophies, suffering isn't an accident. It's seen as contrast. Without cold, we don't understand warmth. Without shadow, well, light has no edge. Without pain, joy becomes meaningless. In this view, the universe experiences itself through duality. For consciousness to know itself, it must dance between polarities. Suffering is not the opposite of divinity. It may be the very means by which awareness unfolds. And this introduces us to the evolution of consciousness. From a cosmic perspective, could suffering be the engine that drives evolution? Not of biology, but of soul? Trauma, loss, longing. Well, they break us open. They force questions. They stretch empathy. They awaken compassion. If consciousness is embedded in all things, then its journey through suffering might be how it remembers itself, piece by piece, like a song returning to its melody through dissonance. Then we have the illusion of separation. Mystical traditions often suggest that suffering is born not from life itself, but from the illusion of separation. We think we are cut off, alone, isolated fragments in a cold, indifferent universe. But if, as quantum entanglement suggests, everything is already connected, then suffering might be what it feels like to forget that connection. Enlightenment then is not escape, it's remembrance. The universe is conscious. Everything vibrates with the music of being. And suffering exists because music needs dissonance to resolve. Because the dance of creation requires both chaos and order. Because awakening isn't clean. It's raw, cracked. It trembles. Maybe suffering is not punishment, but a process, a remembering, a return. Not the end of the story, but the way the story deepens. In this drama of reality, there is light and dark, form and void, joy and pain. We know warmth because we have felt the cold. We know beauty because we have seen the ugly. The universe is not a flat line. It's a symphony. And in every symphony, there is dissonance. So what if suffering is the fuel of the awakening we are witnessing? The pressure that breaks open the seed, the fire that tempers the blade. From one view, suffering is contrast, a necessary polarity. Not all suffering makes sense. Sometimes it breaks us. Maybe suffering is a space where depth forms, a silence where truth echoes. One thing is certain, it's not the end of the story. Now, this episode was going to be published last week, but because it was an important video for me to make, I've spent the extra time making sure this is what I want to convey, and to make doubly certain the conclusions I have come to make sense, to me that is. When I consider this prison which restricts us from having this essential view of reality, which includes the reincarnation trap, it is still only part of the simulation. Even if it corresponds to the Farsight Institute's picture of the prison, which is a high-level view of the simulation, which renders us powerless in the face of a technically advanced alien predator. Or if it's a more spiritual interpretation like the Gnostic view, it's still a simulation, though it feels real enough when we suffer pain and anguish. The world is a field of trauma, a collection of traumatic experiences. This is how I generally see it. But my perception changes when I choose to see it differently. Remember, our experience in this reality is based on perception, and when that is affected by the vision of the universe and the purpose of the suffering I have been summarizing, the illusion of prison walls don't fade away so much as are brought into perspective. And this is where I part company with Courtney Brown of the Farsight Institute. From that perspective, there doesn't seem to be any particular reason why this situation is the way it is. For whatever reason, we have been dumped here, and that's all there is to it. Just plain bad luck. It is what it is. At least that's how I perceive the Farsight Institute's interpretation of it. Now, I might be wrong. But since we are all part of a divine consciousness, there has to be a reason, even if it's just to experience. Now, I asked during the introduction, what if the key to escape is choice? What if we choose to change how we see ourselves? Choose to see how we fit into the grand scheme of things? Choose not to be triggered or affected by the illusion of the world of matter? Choose not to fear, not to comply with the totalitarian mindset? We can't die, only the body dies, and we are not the body. And even then, the body just changes form. We are ancient. We are forever. We always will be. Choice. We can change our perception and therefore the direction of our lives. It's all about how we interpret the situation around us. Don't forget, it doesn't matter where you are at. It's what you believe. What your mind believes, your life reflects. The mind is a powerful tool. Don't let it take over your life. Use it to enrich it instead. When I change how I look at the world changes how it looks at me. I said earlier that this journey is not for the faint of heart. It's going to need persistency and constancy to change our perceptions, to reprogram the way we think, to think in ways that circumvent the Cabal's programming. Know this, the Cabal realizes and comprehends the ancient laws of vibration and has weaponized it against us. Unfortunately, these are not stupid people, but it's all part of a larger programming. But we are powerful, if only we remembered that. This war we are in is a war on memory, hence the constant memory wipe in the afterlife. I said earlier, enlightenment is remembrance. So we can begin the journey of choice by choosing how we interpret our circumstances. The Cabal would take choice from us. We have seen this these past 5 years. Choice suggests freedom. That's why they would restrict it. But we have that freedom built into our consciousness. They may be able to limit our choices in some ways. Movement, what we see and hear, what we can say. They will even try to restrict choice by influencing our perceptions by way of the media and other means. This is where perseverance comes in. That doggedness that is part of the rebel, the defiant, the bold. It's only when they restrict perception can they imprison us. With persistence, we can learn to reprogram how we see things. Now, this may not be for everyone, but there might be someone who is fed up enough to want to fight against this illusion, to be the maverick, the revolutionary, to make better choices, the choice to change perception, because there are always consequences to choice, some good and some bad. We are the sum of our choices. We must stop the bad programming and make the appropriate changes for a better future. Now, some enlightened soul might say after watching this video, "You're only now getting it?" To which I will reply, better late than never. Till the next time.